What are you? When you have freed yourself from the chains of faith and learnt the concepts of right thinking, you'll be able to explore reality without faith's limitations. One of the best places to start exploring reality is looking at yourself. What are you? For the sake of argument, I need a word that reflects the real you, and I can't use soul because that implies something that we need faith for. It's mumbo-jumbo, it's spooky. I shall call it the id, not to be confused with the psychological term. The id is your essence, your identity. If there is a soul, then it's your soul. If there's a spirit, then it's your spirit. You might chuckle at this point and point yourself at the mirror and say, that's me. Is your id your physical body? If your hand was cut off, you might say, that is my hand. It becomes a possession when you perceive it as separated from your body, from your id. And piece by piece you can lop off parts of your body and realize they were not part of your id. Every cell in your body is subject to necrosis, cell death, and is replaced through cell reproduction. Every cell in your body is replaced every 7 years, and contrary to popular myth, this includes brain cells. Yet, you would say that your id has continued from babyhood to adulthood. Perhaps this is enough to realize that we are not physical beings. At least we are not physical alone. You might think, well, maybe I am my brain. Perhaps your id is your brain. Our brains are made of switches called neurons, and these neurons fire, or don't fire, in response to stimuli. These firings form neural patterns which have some semantic meanings, like words in a book. One pattern may mean dog, and another means cat. But if your id is your brain, then what happens when your brain changes? When people have serious injuries to their brain, but can still feel that they recognize the continuity of self, and say, I am still me. There was a soldier in the Falklands War who lost 1/3 of the brain, and seemed to make a full recovery. There is no one part of the brain that anyone can point to and say, aha, that is the id. The brain is just a piece of engineering. There are operations available now that can graft brain tissue from fetuses onto the brains of patients with degenerative brain diseases such as Parkinson's, which means that as your brain degenerates, and it can be replaced. Imagine the technology. If a technology was created that allowed us to replace any part of the brain, piece by piece, your entire brain could be replaced, perhaps one neuron at a time. Would you still be you? Of course you would. What does it matter what you are made of? But then, what would happen if they made an exact duplicate of that brain? Would there be 2 of you? Well, there would have to be, wouldn't there? Perhaps brains make minds, and one way to think of this dilemma is to say that id is not the brain, the physical brain, but the thought processes created by the brain. Like the difference between a computer hardware and a computer software. Imagine going through this process of being replaced neuron by neuron and being duplicated. At the moment of divergence, you would see another id, and that other id would suddenly see you. You would not be able to feel each other's sensations or thoughts. You would feel separate. From your own perspective, it would seem like an arbitrary decision as to whether you became one or the other id. So it would seem that ids are thought processes isolated from other thought processes. But what exactly is a thought process? The mental states in our brains are caused by electrons flowing through the neural pathways and altering the chemistry of the synapses and neurons like beads floating along an abacus wire. But how can the movement of these beads be an id? How can that be me? How can that be ourself? What is the difference between moving a cup from one side of my table to an electron moving from one neuron to another? Why does one form a mental state and the other is just a physical change? These physical states somehow represent a meaning, like words in a book. But who is reading the book? For sure, our mental abilities, memories, and even character appear to be somewhere in our brains. But are they what makes you, you? Your memories change. Your mental abilities change, and even your character changes. Yet you are still you. if you have put aside your faith and are ready to adopt new realities, you may see that you cannot define what you are. You're not a physical thing, a mental thing, and you need to have faith to believe in souls, so where do you go from here? Let's explore.